All right, we're recording. It is April 4, 2022, and we've got lots to get through today. I know Nick has the first couple things on the agenda today, but before we get into those, I wanted to just highlight, if you're new to these meetings, if you haven't been here before, welcome first off, but also just anyone and everyone is welcome to comment, ask questions. Some of us have been working on this project for a while and forget certain details that are likely not obvious or could be confusing. So please chime in if you have any questions or thoughts or whatever. This is meant to be an open, informal kind of meeting. Feel free to add items to the agenda. This is a doc that I think anyone can edit. So feel free to add things as we go. But with that intro, I think, Nick, you're up. First, I think you wanted to talk about the ready condition, and I know you just joined, so if you want to,
that's okay. That's okay. No, it's cool. It's cool. This one, Nathan raised this. Thanks for raising it, Nathan. About in the context of the conformance tests. Right now, the conformance tests, when you're implementing them, we don't have a way to signal to objects that to sort of consumers that this configuration is fully propagated and everything is good and you can run tests through here and it should all work. So I think that we've talked in this PR about ways to work around this, which I think are the way to go. And I think we're pretty much in agreement on this PR, but I think if you scroll down to the bottom, Rob, Nathan raised the good point that we need to talk about like ready versus accepted versus programmed versus some other, like, how do we signal, hey, from the controller, hey, I've done everything I can do. I'm sending this off to my data plane, and at some point it's going to be ready. And then how do we have a way to signal that the data plane is definitely configured and everything is done? And are those useful distinctions, and should we have separate conditions to call them out? Right now we have accepted, which means the implementation has checked the object and everything is valid, and we're going to generate config and send it off. I think the original plan was that we would have accepted and then ready, and ready would cover, hey, everything is good. I've sent the config off. Everything should be ready real soon now. But I think that Evan raised the good point that from Knativ's point of view, they've had to, for Contour, I know for sure, they've had to do a lot of things building probing logic to check to see if when the config is fully propagated. I also know that for Envoy-based control planes, not being sure that the config has fully propagated to the entire data plane is not straightforward, and I suspect that will probably be the case for quite a few data planes. So I guess the question that I'm trying to ask here is just to have a space for us to talk about this, to say, what do we think we should do? I'm kind of the opinion that having ready mean ready real soon. And yes, you're going to have to do some retries with exponential backoff. That's Kubernetes, and you should be doing that anyway, is sort of my feeling about where we should go. But I'm happy to be talked off this ledge.
I think we should be adding ready.
And what do you think ready should mean is the question that I'm really asking.
Like ready should mean that the data plane has accepted the configuration.
Okay, so yeah, so that it should mean, hey, everything is good right now, and you should be, as soon as you see this update, you should be able to send requests through the data plane. That's your feeling? Okay. So that's a pretty strong ready guarantee.
It seems like part of the confusion here is coming from some implementations may not have a clear way to implement ready, a true ready of, the implementation may understand that they've sent something off to the data plane. They may not understand that a request can be sent via that routing immediately. And at least in some cases, it seems like that may be difficult or impossible to tell without some form of active probing or some other measure like that. Interesting what others think here.
I think that would be true for a lot of implementations, like a lot, not just like Envoy or Nginx or whatever.
To clarify, you think that it would be difficult to understand a true ready condition or to?
Yes, that's true. Like true ready condition in the sense where it is propagated to every thread or something like that. Like at that level, I think it's difficult. Like one can't assume that something has been posted to the data plane. That means it is available on all threads or processes or routines or whatever you have, right? Like and people, or rather implementers, may confuse readiness as, okay, I have propagated it to my data plane. Now, generally, most implementations try to avoid the latency when a configuration shows up in a data plane, and the moment it is being used for proxying traffic. Like that is generally minimized, and most users should not you know figure, like most users should not be bothered by it, considering Kubernetes is eventually consistent. So um, yeah, I think like having the configuration posted to the data plane should be enough. The other thing is very, very hard to correctly implement in most implementations, as far as my experience goes.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I saw someone mention was like, maybe we just have our ready means that, but when you see this condition that within some number of seconds, that you should be confident that the data plane is programmed. Because practically, I think you can't at machine scales, at machine time scales, as Harry says, like you can't be sure of this. You can't be sure of this in sub-second kind of timescales, which is what if you put a strong guarantee in, that's what's implied.
Yeah, and it's not useful really. Like
yeah, I don't disagree. I agree with you. But like the point here, sorry, the point here is that
I'll just jump in and say I pretty much agree with Harry. Trying to make sure that every last piece of the infrastructure is fully active and programmed is super difficult. And in some cases, like the gateway controller might be running on somebody's cloud infrastructure, so example, like Contours controller or consoles or somebody else's might be running on Azure or AWS or GCP, and as part of it being integrated and stuff, we may that software may program some part of the cloud service, and so it's out of the controller's hand at that point what's ready. Yeah, somebody said or via DNS update delay propagation. That's absolutely true. So I think the best we can realistically do is just say ready is the system is ready as much as we are able to control that state. It's a good faith best effort ready. My 2 cents on it.
So I agree with everything that's been said up to this point. My only nitpick here would be the terminology used. I'm hesitant to use the word ready to describe something that isn't truly ready or we can't know for sure is ready. I would prefer something that is more descriptive, maybe programmed, maybe a word like that describes we've sent this off. This is configured. This is, I don't know what the right term is, but I don't think that.
Configured things, all right.
Yeah. So I don't know what that term is. I don't think ready is quite the right thing, because I think someone seeing ready is going to interpret that how ready is interpreted elsewhere in Kubernetes, for example, or elsewhere in other systems. And that's not what we can guarantee here.
Would committed be a better word, providing we check that it is being committed to the control plane?
yeah, I think configured or committed either one are probably fine to describe what we're talking about.
And be very specific. This is committed to the control plane. It's not to the data plane.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so like the control plane. So what you're saying is committed means the control plane has finished its work, and you're waiting for the gears to grind somewhere else. Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bowie raises the point that committed has a very specific meaning in the sort of underlying databases, right? So
Yeah.
configured. I feel like configured probably is a better word there. I mean, let's not buckshot too hard on the name, but like I think that I think Rob's point is fair that ready does, as Shane said, it kind of implies like ready to pass traffic right now as soon as you see it. And if we can't guarantee that, then we shouldn't. Then we should, like I said, like there's a lot of buckshotting we can do about the name here, and I think that the key thing is that it's the two things that we're getting out of this conversation are it shouldn't be ready because that has a specific meaning that we can't allow for, and it should be some other name that means something similar to that. That the control plane has finished its work. Now we're waiting for gears to grind, and the data plane will be ready real soon now. TM for some value as soon. Does that sound reasonable?
One caveat I want to point out is the status that we have is it has a control plane level status, right? There is no like data plane level status anyways. So we can have something that is representative of most data planes, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, semantically.
I think that's a very good point, Harry. All the control plane can know about is the control plane, right? Like unless it actively goes and probes and does other stuff. It feels to me like maybe we should have some description somewhere in the documentation about conditions where we say, like, we have specifically not included a ready condition because ready means blah, 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 blah. Many implementations find this difficult. If your implementation wishes to do a ready condition, then it must mean, it must be used to mean that the data plane is completely programmed and consistent and ready to pass traffic as soon as someone sees that condition present, or something like that. Just to disambiguate this completely, to make sure that, because the condition design is such that people can add their own conditions, right? Like, and so you don't have to only use the conditions that we provide you. So we need to say, if you want to use a ready condition, that's cool, but it must mean exactly this and only this. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable compromise. I think my take on this discussion so far is that we're all in agreement on what this condition should mean, and that we should stay away from the ready term for what it should mean. So I think those things are clear. I think there's already a follow-up issue to discuss this further, but in that we can discuss whatever name we think is, I think finding the correct name is going to be challenging, but as long as it's in the same ballpark, I think that's great. So
yeah, I think the exact nuances of the name are going to be fun to argue about, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we have a name, that we have a behavior floor that we all agree on, that everyone does, that's in the spec. That's the most important. At the end of the day, whatever the name will end up meaning, whatever we tell it, whatever we say it means, because we'll define the spec to say that's what it means.
great.
Yep.
Cool. All right, ready for the next one?
Okay, that's me. I think I might need to share my screen for this one, Rob.
Sure. Yeah, let me figure that out.
Nick, I've got your stuff incorporated into the GAP PR.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
So if we want to just do that, I can put the link in here.
So I actually have a mirror doc that I want to walk through, because I actually have some changes that I want to make to what I had in that previous thing that I really sat down and worked through yesterday. So okay, give me a sec, make sure I'm showing the right screen and everything. There's this one. Okay, you can see that. Cool. Let me just, there's my Okay, so this is me trying to think about what can inclusion look like, and what can it look like from a graph point of view. Is that a smile I see on your face there, Bowie?
I'm reminded of like automata class and Petri nets.
Yeah, totally. Like, yeah, like I was trying to be relatively exhaustive here because I'm worried that I'm very worried about doing the status for this. Is going to be very easy to make it so there's something that we can't represent in the status. And so, so yeah, like this is the simple cases. Now in all of the diagrams here, I've used two routes. So this is gateway here, parent route, child route. Okay. So parent route is obviously the one in the middle. Child route is the leaf node. So I've used two at any level to represent an arbitrary number. We've got 0, 1, and some arbitrary number greater than 1. Obviously, it wouldn't be arbitrary size, but the important part here is once you've got 2, then you've got 3 and 5 and 10 and stuff like that. Okay, so we've got these are the easy cases, right? Like where you've got one child route, one parent route, one gateway. Our current status represents this easily because the child route has a parent ref that has the status of the parent route, and the parent route has the status of the gateway route. Like the status kind of works already what we have. Same for all of these ones where you've got sort of multiple child routes rolling up to a thing. It kind of works. It's not going to work perfectly, but it'll kind of work. However, when we get down to more complicated ones, which are there because we allow multiple parent refs, it starts getting a little hazy. So we've got a single parent route that attaches to multiple gateways, single parent route that attaches to multiple gateways and has multiple children, and then the opposite where you've got two parent routes that attach to one gateway and one child route that attaches to multiple parent routes that then roll up to the same gateway. So we need to be able to make sure that we represent all of these statuses in whatever we end up with doing for status. That's the purpose of these diagrams, to be like, to make you have a little bit of a headache, to be like, look, we got a problem here that we need to represent correctly in the status. Okay, anyone want to say anything before I move on?
Is there any visibility limitations that we're putting on status? So is it the case that, for example, if we said, okay, you can see the status of all the different routes that are attached everywhere, or not? So
I think, sorry, you go, Jeff.
I was just to say, I actually added a note about this at one point in the gap, because you could have an issue where, depending on what information you're exposing in the status, it could provide, if the namespaces are different organizational units, it could expose information that's confidential to one group and shouldn't be visible to another. So it's going to be a challenge, I think, to figure out exactly what the right balance is.
Totally. Okay, so I have concentrated for now on thinking about what we need to be able to do to make sure that we can represent all the possible errors that I could think of. So let's talk specific things. So this is the example that I had in the HackMD earlier. So we've got a HTTP parent route that parents to gateway A and gateway B. Sorry. This should be over here. Okay, gateway A has a host name that allows star.example.com. Gateway B has a host name that allows subdomain.example.com. HTTP parent has no host name, but HTTP child has test domain. Okay, so that means that HTTP child is not valid for attaching to gateway B, but it is valid for attaching to gateway A. Right now, there's no way to represent this because the status only has one hop status. So like HTTP child can only represent its status with respect to HTTP parent. And as far as the HTTP child, HTTP parent relationship is set up, you can't say, hey, this doesn't work, because it does work to attach to HTTP parent. It only does not work in reference to the sort of inclusion from gateway B.
I have a question. The status that we're talking about is on which resource?
So on the HTTP child, there is no way to
Okay,
represent.
so that is the focus for this discussion currently.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do, a rule 0 that I'm trying to go with here is that if I'm the owner of HTTP child, I should be able to understand the status of my resource by looking at only my resource. I shouldn't have to go and chase down the HTTP parent or the gateway to find out my status because I might not have access to them, right? Like I might be referring to them by reference and not actually have read access to them.
Got it.
Yeah. So this is the example that I had in the HackMD. This is the gateway. This is what I originally proposed, is that we would have and so this is what I thought it would look like originally, that the parent would actually fail attachment because the child route doesn't work. But then I was like, well, that's pretty bad because now what do you put on the child route? There's no way to say on the child route how that would work. Now, I wanted to contrast that with this case where we only have a single gateway, and we've got a parent A with start.example.com and a parent B with subdomain.example.com and a child with test domain. And so if we do that, then the status looks pretty straight. What we have already with the parent refs, it works. We've got.
Can you clarify? So go back to the diagram.
Yep.
You have. So how does test domain fit into subdomain?
It doesn't. So that's the.
Okay, so that's the error.
Yeah, the error is that subdomain and test domain don't match. Start.example.com and test domain do match. And so that the whole point of this exercise is to create a situation where somewhere in the chain there's some config that doesn't work, that will reject that part of the config. So just as a quick aside, this is why I think it's really important for us to talk about this as inclusion, because functionally what you are doing is you are taking the child and the parent and including all of that config into the config of the listener on the gateway. The fact that you are using that to delegate control of those objects is kind of a bonus, but the thing that's actually going to happen is that you're taking those objects and collapsing them down into one big object at the end of the day. That's what this whole API is built around. Okay. So in the case that we are doing the parent, this one here, where we've got HTTP routes parented by a gateway and then a child route parenting to two things, what we have today actually works. We've got the two parents, they get an accepted one because they are accepted onto the gateway because the gateway has no requirements. And then the child one gets accepted by parent A and not accepted by parent B. This is all pretty standard stuff, the same as if it was on two gateways. So what we have here, it just works. So what I am thinking is that the thing that I came up with was, I was like, I had originally an idea about having a thing called children, which as someone raised was very confusing because you inside of parents, you've got a children, how does that work? What I actually came up with here is that for the child route, we have our parent ref, we have parent conditions, and then a grandparents one. We only allow two levels. So we only have parents and grandparents. And so then that means that for the final status, you have to look at the grandparent stanza because it's been included. And then the grandparents sort of effectively gives you the full include path, no matter which way you end up going. And then if there's an error somewhere in that include path, then the grandparent status tells you exactly where in the include path the problem was.
And I think just to make sure, the current proposal only has two levels of inclusion.
Yes.
I'm not doing yeah.
Correct.
Specifically to avoid any further shenanigans with being able to worry about loops and and any other directed graph.
I see. Because it sounds like ignoring how it's factored in the status API, it sounds like it's you could have a unique status for every path from where you are as a child to the forest routes, right? Because all the gateways form trees of themselves.
Yep.
And then in terms of like how we like consolidate it, is it a case of like, what do we think the most common layout is, and then we kind of consolidate in that way? It's sort of like, do columns come first or rows come first kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
question. In a OLAP cube, it's like, do you consolidate this way or that way? Would it be more clear if we just said paths? Like for this path, just like this path status, this path status.
Yeah. So you go, Rob.
So I think what Nick already highlighted, the previous example highlighted it, is that for most cases, we really only need parents. Like that is parent status is what we are going to use for 99.9% of use cases. That includes route to gateway, and that includes route to route in most simple use cases. I think where you need this kind of grandparents status, stanza, whatever, is that really it feels like quite an edge case, right? It's that one diagram where you have parent route attaching to two gateways, and that parent route not only is attaching to two gateways, but they conflict. It seems like grandparents is even unnecessary if it's only necessary if there's a conflict somewhere, or if you have a partially valid state. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's probably going to be some value in having grandparents, even if it only says accepted, right? Like, because it tells you as a user, like where you've ended up. I mean, as Jeff says, there's a information leakage problem for like hyper secure environments or something like that, where you don't want people to know about the gateway that you're talking to, and having like a parent ref there maybe is a problem. But I would rather err on the side of having the UX be possible for this is complicated enough without like, we need to make sure that we allow for people to do the things that they can do in the API, that they have a way to know that whether or not it's worked. Yeah.
Right. I think like my only one of the things that I hesitate with the grandparents is that imagine writing the code to process this, like to show it on some UI. If you have just paths, like someone can just write handling for like such and such path, like status, and then they can, if path is structured, they can crack the path inside it to see like, okay, well, this is this parent or this parent. But if you have like grandparents, then you have to have like, if parents, blah, 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 then if grandparents, blah, blah, and kind of interpret it within the context of each of those situations, which feels way harder to do for the end user.
I don't disagree, but in this case, we've got such a large range of possible cases that like, in order to generically handle this, you are going to have to build that diagram that I told you anyway, right? Like,
but like the path would be,
yeah, but you're going to be just parsing the path
specific, right?
You're going to be parsing the path in the same way that you're going to be parsing the parents thing, and then also that means that then you'll have to have a path for every time when you only really care about one hop, right? Like you're going to have the full path regardless, and that's what I'm saying. I think,
but that's okay, isn't it? Like, I'm just thinking because it's like,
I'm also trying not to change the status at this point, because that will be an API.
Oh, ref. I see. Is that the issue?
Yeah. I don't want to change the parent ref thing, because that would be an API rev, which would throw our API review that we are just starting out the window.
Yeah, and I think there's real value here.
We can still change it.
Yeah, I know we can, but like, I think there's other stuff that there's other stuff that I have to tidy up that I've noticed as part of this, but I think, I think that this really feels to me like, because of the fact that a lot of the time you can handle it with just the parent ref that we have already, and then I think that probably we should mandate that if you are doing this, you must have a grandparents thing that tells you your ultimate parent. This is going to be more important if you start talking about non-gateway terminating like root nodes, like a mesh object or something like that, which people have been talking about already. I don't know if people would want to do non-gateway root objects with this full inclusion thing. But if they do, then like this also handles that case. And that's what the thing I like about this is it's actually pretty generic. It does, as you say, Barry, you're 100% right that it's a bit of a hassle to traverse this status object and rebuild the graph that was used to get to it, but it does have all the information you need to do it. And it's basically reusing the same patterns at the grandparents level. Like you can copy all of the fields at the grandparents level from the field on the parent, like the parent's parent ref. You don't actually need to go and look up the gateway to get this. You can just copy them from the parent ref, which you're going to need to look up for them.
So the other thing is like, so right now you have like parent, some status, and then let's say you have two grandparents, like it's like amoebas or something. But like you have like a status for the grandparent, a status for a grandparent, and then another status. But then this path and this path is actually independently.
This is what I'm proposing, because that the first level is the parent of any direct parents you have. And then the grandparent struct goes underneath that parent that tells you these are the grandparents of that direct parent, right? So if you've got, I didn't even put it in here because, if you've got this one, but you have two gateways on each, or two gateways on one and one gateway on another, then this structure still works. You will have two items at this level.
Who's responsible for the partially attached status? So I see that for the parent, you basically like this is the child. Sorry, this is the child. This is the parent. This is like two gateways, right? So you have like two paths like this. One of them is detected to not work. Then they go back and they have to populate the status of this parent block.
So in all of these examples, I've assumed that all of these gateways are the same gateway class that have been reconciled by the same controller. However, that does not have to be the case. That is the reason why we have the controller name field at each level, because the controller name says this is the controller name of the
I guess
controller.
in that case, like, how do you use that information?
So
let's say
conceivably, you can have this happen where G1 is one gateway class and G2 is a separate gateway class being reconciled by a different controller. In that case, the status here will have two parent refs. One will be the parent ref that leads up to gateway 1, and it has a controller name of gateway 1's gateway class. One will be the parent ref that leads up to gateway 2 and has a controller name of gateway 2's gateway class.
Yeah, that's why like I was thinking, would it be easier to have the path, because that basically collapses all of that into like a uniform list.
So are you talking about the path being like a string, or the path being like a
structured path?
Right. Okay. I mean,
because right now you have like controller, parent, and then grandparents.
Yep.
But really what you have is a bunch of paths. Most of the time you just have one path, but sometimes you have like two paths. And then one thing we also want to consider is like, can you control the number of paths? But like, then like writing the code to process this, you just have to look at like path. And if you care about the actual path, then you can look inside it. Otherwise, it's just like looking at like path status.
So so in my mind, you start with the parents to be like, do I care about this parent? You basically start at the child objects to build this, if you're processing this whole thing, you look at you're going to have to traverse the graph a couple times, no matter what happens, right? Like, because you're going to have to build the graph. You as someone parsing this whole structure are going to have to start with gateway classes, find gateways, find routes attached to gateways, find routes attached to routes. And then to parse the status, you're going to have to take that graph you've had to build anyway and sort of work backwards from the child one to find out which ones are relevant and which ones are good. Like, if you're building like some sort of management UI to handle this sort of thing, you're going to have to do a downward pass, and then the status works on an upward pass. So like that means that because you've already done a downward pass, by the time you get to the children, you should have details about the parents. And this just then lets you check the details about the parents you already have from traversing the graph.
Yeah, I guess like my question is like this partially attached, like
Yep.
in this example, that probably it's not possible to emit that for the parent if they are being managed by two different gateway classes.
So how
No, so
that
this-
would be.
So that would actually look. That would literally look like this. Let me show you. So if you've got two gateway classes, it would look like this. I'm going to say that the controller name is the name of the gateway to make things a little easier to understand, right? And then so what would happen here is you would get that, and then you would get that. Right, so that would be how it would look like. So this.
So it requires a bit more coordination, doesn't it? Because the middle parent ref status would have to sense each other, and then they would have to go down one more level to know that it wasn't fully attached, and then like go back. I'm just trying to think of like how you would figure that out.
Contract for each. So actually, in this case, gateway A is actually attached. This is not partially attached. This is just fully attached, as far as it's concerned.
But is it because it's?
Yes, because as far as gateway A is concerned, everything is good. It's only gateway B that has a problem.
Right.
And specifically, it's only that controller. It's only so for contour controller, everything is great because the gateways it cares about are doing great with this route. Let's say Istio one route is not happy, so that's partially attached or something like that, or not accepted. I don't know what the appropriate thing is, but
I was making stuff up.
Yeah, but all of these are very much namespaced by the controller name for a reason, and this, I think.
Yeah,
this is
it feels very it feels not as symmetric as we could do, because you have like controller, comma, parent, comma, gateway, whereas really is parent, comma, gateway, because gateway already implies a specific controller in some ways. It's like the controller thing is almost like an extra level of grouping.
Yeah, the controller thing is absolutely an extra level of grouping, because controller controller implies gateway class, right? Like we're grouping by gateway class, gateway. So we're actually got four groupings, right? Like gateway class, gateway, parent route, child route, right? Like that's a 4-layer hierarchy. So one of the things that is definitely not clear enough in our docs about the status is that it's expected that if you look at the status for parents and you see multiple references, you're expected to go through and find the ones that match your controller name and put the other ones back. Like you patch only the ones that have your controller name in them. You don't clear anything else, right? It's the same as with conditions. If you find conditions that you don't know about, you put them back. You don't mess with them.
I see. And we accomplish that because we label in the Kubernetes API that's like a,
yes,
I don't remember what it's called. It's like independently updatable list or something. So I do have a question. Like, you have controller name under grandparents as well as controller name at the top?
I do, yeah. It's probably
redundant. I mean, that just illustrates to me why it's not as symmetric as we can make it.
Yeah, so there are. I left the fields in there because I wanted to be able to talk about this, but you're right. It's probably redundant because it's implied by that one. Like you can't have a controller name be different at those different levels. It has to be the same all the way down. So it's actually confusing to have that there, and I should take it out. That's much better. But like I think that the structure of having parents and then grandparents, that feels to me like I see what you're saying, that they're having something, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't see how you would have like any structure that you have is going to end up looking a little bit like this. The thing about this one is the structure works from the bottom up rather than working from the top down. And it feels like what you
So,
want is.
yeah, one question though is like, what would you do with the intermediate state? Because I think implicitly we are saying that, right, it's like G, P, R, CR. And we're saying that from CR, you should have something sensible for the status of PR. But
From PR.
But like, what would you put there in the intermediate? Like, or
So
should
what
we
am I
just
putting
shove all the status to just like this path and like, here's your state, you are attached or not?
So
Like,
are you saying like, what does the status look like from the parent route point of view?
I'm saying on here, you have a parent ref and a status attached to that.
Mhm.
And then additionally, you have a grandparent ref and a status attached to that. Like, is there a like, what do you do with those two? And like, wouldn't the user just care about for my
status?
given path, like, did it work?
Yeah, totally.
Like, what would you do with the intermediate information?
I mean, so the point being here that, you know, if you've made a mistake, so the intermediate information is for, I attempted, so remember that the way that this attachment works is that the owner of the child route says, I want to attach to parent route. The owner of the parent route has an allowed route stanza that says whether or not that child route will be allowed to attach. So there's a two-way handshake here. And that intermediate status is for saying, is for telling the
But
child route.
wouldn't you be like, on the CR to PR1 to G1, let's say it was disallowed, it'd be like CR1 to PR1 to G1 disallowed because of policy on PR1.
So yeah,
CR1,
I mean,
PR1, G2 also the same thing because of policy on PR1.
yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I feel like what we've got here does that already, because like because you've got, you know, the parent.
Yeah, I think that's less. That
I guess
I think that is true. I'm just saying from a symmetry perspective, it's like at the end of the day, you don't need that grandparent status. You just need, like, for that path up towards the gateway, like X happened like along the path. You don't need a separate one that's like the grandparent, you know, really likes you, but the parent like doesn't like you. Like,
yeah, I get it.
You do need to know that, you know, whether, you know, so you need to know whether you've been able to attach as a child, you've attached to the parent or not. And then that parent, has it attached to the, you know, any of the gateways or the listeners that it's supposed to attach to, has it successfully attached to those?
I think we do need to clarify that. For example, is it the case that you adopt a child and your grandparent disowns you?
Yeah. So
so like,
so that's actually comes on to I think another thing that I was going to talk about. That I think there's a couple of related things there, but so just before we move on to that thing, because that's a slightly separate issue. So what you're kind of saying is you feel that it's the fact that we have two steps here of status. You would like to see this status sliced via path, and then have conditions on the path, basically, like to say, like
I just, maybe it's even just at a conceptual level. Like at the end of the day, there's like this hyper matrix or whatever, like where it's like the paths on one column, or sorry, fully denormalized like thing was like path, comma, status, or is it path, comma, a list of status where it's like the status corresponds to the path, and then right, it's like, is that meaningful, or is it like literally like each node in the graph that you have has its own status and it's like common, I guess.
So, and that last one that you said is is the way that I have been thinking about it, is that each node in the graph has its own status, and that the status of the path, the factor of the path status is kind of I don't know, like a function of the individual node statuses. And I think that's important because I have specifically structured these examples in a certain way, because I think that there's another thing that I wanted to skip, but that we need to talk about now. If you look in this parent route, I have an allowed routes, but also a backend refs, because I wanted to avoid the question of what happens if you have allowed routes and there are no routes attached. What is the status of this route then? You know, so that is this graph I put down here. Yeah, like when you have this and you have a parent that has no config of its own, it has no backend refs. What's the status of that parent? Is it attached successfully or is it not attached successfully? You know, and is the fact that it generates no config an error or not an error? You know, in my mind, so this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you all. You know, I will stop and let you all have a short discussion on what you think about this, because I have thoughts, obviously. But
So the backend ref, I see.
Like real, like that's what actually will generate like clusters and endpoints, and you know, like
Right.
and actually connect the representation of traffic that you have with a gateway with something that is going to have traffic routed to it.
So if you wanted to have a default like place to go, unless you have things attached, that's how you would express it. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
But as designers of the API, the thing that we care about here is what happens in this case? What does the status look like in this case? Is that HTTP parent accepted by gateway A and gateway B when there is no config?
Yeah, I think
not-
like that's
Right.
an interesting one. It's like if you wanted that situation, which is like nothing attached, you still go to someplace, is the way to do it is like you have to just come with your own child thing that's just like shoved in as the backstop basically. Or we
So
have
now-
some like ability to combine the two.
I
You
think
can't-
that. Sorry, you go, Jeff.
Thanks. I was going to say, you can't assume that the routes are going to be loaded, I guess you'd say, into the system in any particular order. And, you know, they may be created at different times, you know, days, weeks, months apart, and constantly changing. So I think you have to maintain some kind of status that says, yeah, that the parent as it exists can successfully attach to me. There's nothing preventing it as it is right now. And, you know, it's not doing anything. It's not contributing anything to the listener's routing. But then at some point, a child may attach to it, to that parent. And yes, it does. Otherwise, you could be looking at a parent, and you could be saying, why is it not attaching to the gateway? Is it because it's there's some problem, or is it because it's got nothing contributing to its config? You have to start figuring out what your issue is.
Yeah,
This is what I said down the bottom here. The zero valid config rule. Like what's the rule for zero valid config? Like what do we do in that case? Sorry.
I agree with Jeff's comment too. I do want to time check because we have other things to get through today. But this has been great discussion, and I think we should continue. Is this all going to be included in Jeff's gap, or?
So I will do. I will propose some updates. I'll propose the grandparent thing. Then Bowie, we can argue on there about it a bit more if you want. But the thing that I wanted to just mention here is, in the case of the zero config thing, I think that it should be that the anything that results in zero like routing config should attach. The attached condition should be true, but we should have a reason that says, hey, you know, you're attached, but there's nothing, but you're not doing, but it doesn't do anything, right? Like, so that people have a way to know, yes, you attached, okay, but hey, your config isn't doing anything. That's really important, because if you have, this case, say this case here, and for some reason this child could not. Let's talk about it a bit. You have this case, and for some reason this child cannot attach to the parent route. Then the parent route needs to stay attached to the gateway. And so like, I think that the rule that we need to have is things can attach, but if there's no config present, then they'll tell you in their attached status.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That gets more important the more complicated you make the include shenanigans. And yeah, thanks again, Jeff, for ensuring that we have a clear rule that says only one layer of includes people, because otherwise madness lies.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, at the fact that we have multiple levels of parent ref like multiple parent refs available is already pretty mind bending.
So if for anybody that didn't catch it earlier, there is a formal GEP up now for the gateway inclusion. So it's GEP 1058 is actually the number. The PR is like 1080, I think, or 1085. So you can actually see the detailed proposal in there with lots of rules and restrictions and constraints and what fors and how to choose and whatever. So what, fire away at it. We'll figure out what you need to change.
The other reason I made these graphs is that I think that we might need to include some graphs, some pictures like this, when we start talking about the status in the GEP itself, to make it clear what we're talking about. I think that the examples are not nearly as clear as having something that looks like this.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I've monopolized enough time.
No worries. This was very helpful. Good discussion all around. Thank you, everyone. And those diagrams are very useful, and I'm looking forward to seeing them in more gaps or more diagrams like that. With that said, let me move on to the beta 1 milestone. I think Nick mentioned it earlier, but we have formally requested API review for v0.5.0, which will include v1 beta 1 graduation, hopefully, of gateway class, gateway, and HTTP route. There are a few things open still in our milestone. Most of them are related to the webhook and documentation as per usual. You notice that we're seeing a few more of these icons indicating that we have PRs ready for a chunk of the issues left in the milestone. But if you see things that are left open here that still have not been, have not had someone assigned, there's a few of them, and you have some extra cycles, by all means, take some time to work on these and assign yourself. We can appreciate any additional contributions to get us through to v1 beta 1. I know we're all looking forward to that release. With that, I really wanted to highlight the pull requests. I think we have more pull requests now than I've ever seen, at least active, open, ready for review in this project. So thank you, everyone, for great PRs. But for anyone who wants to review, there is more material available for you than has ever existed. So enjoy. Jeff, I want to highlight your PR here. That's 1085. This is that gap that I'm sure will only grow larger over time.
That's an easy one.
Yeah, real easy one. So encourage reviews on this one. One more that I wanted to highlight is by Chow down here. This is 1082. I approve this one, but I wanted someone else to take one more look at it. I think, Harry, you've already commented on it as well, but this is just a docs PR for port and parent ref. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think this one may be one of the closest PRs to get ready to go. So if anyone has time, this is 1082. And while we're here, does anyone want to call out one of their PRs that could use some attention?
I think we've got a few conformance test ones that we need to make sure we get in. I think there's some discussion on the cleanup one, but I think this supported virtual consistency and conformance tests. This will make everyone's life actually implementing the conformance test much easier. I haven't reviewed it yet, but I will today. I think that absent the discussion about the ready condition, this is probably fine to go in personally. But I'll do a review today.
Yeah, last I checked, this was right on track. I'd seen a few comments from different implementers saying that this made their test runs green instead of somewhat flaky, which is great news all the way around. So thanks to Nathan for taking this one on. This is highly related to that conditions conversation you had earlier. But I personally agree this is awfully close. I just need to take one more look too. Cool. The other conformance test, this is a big one, is for reference policy. This also looked really close as well. And yeah, I think it just needs a follow-up from Mike in this case.
I think there's definitely discussion in our future about how we handle different controllers supporting different sets of objects. I don't want to do it now because it's a big discussion and it'll last 40 minutes, same as the other ones. But I just want to put on everyone's radar that we have to have a way for controllers to be able to say, I support HTTP route and HTTPS route or TLS route, but not TCP route or UDP route. And
I mean, I think we're almost getting to the point where we need feature gate like things to describe feature. Yes,
that's what it is.
Yes. So excited for whoever wants to lead that discussion, proposal, whatever. But I wholeheartedly agree. We need a good way to describe what a gateway class is capable of handling. And that is not currently in the API.
I should call out at this point, just going back to the milestone list, I have a bunch of issues assigned to me that I have like a week or so until I go on annual leave, and then when I come back, I'm going to be home for like 2 days and then turn around and go to KubeCon. I'm not going to have a lot of bandwidth in the next little while, so I will probably concentrate on writing up what I think we should do in those issues and then unassigning myself. So there's definitely a bunch of documentation and a bunch of like relatively simple tooling stuff to do, like around building out manifests and a bunch of other stuff that you kind of need to graduate to beta, but are not like heavy coding or heavy design work. So I will try and write those up and hand them off to other people rather than trying to do them myself.
Great. Thanks for the heads up. I think there's one more. I wanted to selfishly highlight one of my PRs that kind of got lost. This is the versioning and webhook docs from a couple weeks ago. I went through and responded. There was great feedback from a few of you on here. I finally got time to respond to all of it. So it just needs one more round of review and hopefully we can get it in soon. This is the reason I care about this is it's, one, it's one more thing for the milestone, but two, it helps explain things to our API reviewers who will for sure have questions about release channels, about our versioning approach, all that fun stuff. So getting this in just helps with that. So yeah, this is 1066. Cool, but I know we're already past time. Thank you everyone for a great discussion today. Was there any last things we should talk about or? Cool, all right. Well, thank you everyone. We'll talk to you next week. Have a good one.